right. And go live. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Public Access America. My name is still Jason. His name is still Jeffrey, and we're here every week to talk about the week. And this week, we have just a great friend and guest joining the show all the way from Pennsylvania. In fact, more specifically, all the way from District 182 in Pennsylvania. And we're just going to talk about what's going on in Pennsylvania and in the races there and have some fun, have an open discussion and get to know just a candidate that I discovered on Twitter at Public Access Pod. We retweet Emily's List pretty heavily because we support Emily's List. Go support them. And we had a tweet pop up and it was Deja. And I read everything. I learned everything. And I was just so excited. Hi, Deja. I'm sorry. I don't want to keep you waiting. Why don't you introduce yourself a little better than I can? And then let me know what's top of mind for you this week.
Hi, Jason. Hi, Jeffrey. Good morning. Well, it's afternoon now for everybody, for those that are listening. My name is Deja Alvarez. I am currently running for state representative in Pennsylvania, the 182nd district, which encompasses most of Center City, Philadelphia.
Okay.
I am a very proud trans Latina woman. I've been running this race. Actually, my 1-year anniversary of when I announced just passed.
Wow.
And so been in this race for a year now, and we have about 2 weeks left before the primary election. And so we're trying to finish strong. Of course, we're trying to win. So,
of course, yeah.
And if elected, I will be the first trans person in the Pennsylvania legislature, and then I will be the first trans Latina legislator in the nation.
And I'm excited to have you here. I was looking at your resume and it has more acronyms than Jeffrey has degrees. So I was super excited about that. That's the problem, is I never know where to start with somebody with so many accomplishments. You are such an amazing advocate, and I appreciate that. So I appreciate candidates like you, and I'm just so amazed. Just so amazed to have you here. Jeffrey, did you have any questions to start off?
No, I want to jump in with Deja and find out what's top of mind, and then of course, let's get this rolling. I mean, I definitely will have some questions, but let's see where things go organically first.
Okay, so what's top of mind for me right now?
Mm-hmm.
One, I'm a little tired. So I work 3 jobs. I work, 2 during the week and then 1 on the weekend. So I usually get home about 4 a.m. on Friday and Saturday morning. And Saturday and Sunday morning, technically. Let me switch that around. So top of mind is there's 2 weeks left in the election. There's so much to do, so much we're trying to get done to make sure that we win this race. And like you had pointed out, like looking at the work that I've done, the advocacy that I've done, you look at all that, and that's not what you would think of when you think of a politician, because we live in a country that kind of sends out the message that you have to be a certain breed of person. You have to be born into a certain family, come from a certain background, have gone to very specific schools, and then have had specific jobs interning for this one and that one and the other one.
You're what I dream of when I think of a representative.
Thank you.
Not a politician, by the way, but like a representative.
Oh, right, exactly. And that's the difference, is that I'm not a politician. When I got into politics, it happened organically through all of the work that I've done, building relationships, helping marginalized communities. And through all of that, I built a lot of relationships with politicians. Some I completely aligned with and became good friends with. Some I don't align so much with them, but it's still good to have that relationship, because sometimes they can help you get things done that need to be done for people that need it. And so I had some of them start to say, when are you going to run for office? And I would always laugh, because I'd be like, wait a minute, hold on, me run for office? I curse, I drink. I'm very open about my history, who I am, where I'm from, what my experiences have been. I've done survival sex work, and, I've done drugs, and I've done all these things. Usually politicians don't admit to any of that until they're in court after they're elected. And so
it's true.
This is a new age, and
yeah,
people are learning to be super positive about their past because it's the struggle that people are relating to, you know?
Yes, and that's the problem. We don't have enough people, not even running in my race. And I'll say this openly, the people running in my race, they don't know what real issues are. They don't know what marginalized communities truly experience. They do a lot of talking about it. And they know how to use the key words and the key phrases, but I want to know what is your lived experience? And then what work have you done to help change those situations for other people that have similar experiences? And so I will put my resume up against anyone's. Unfortunately, that's an uphill battle, especially being a woman, being trans. That people just, oh, she's just an advocate. Oh, she's just an activist, or, she's just a community leader. And it's like, well, actually I am. One, I'm not just a community leader. I'm out here fighting for all marginalized communities. Don't box me into the trans community or the LGBTQ community, because my work goes way beyond that.
You're an advocate in health. You're an advocate in healthcare in a way that people don't give you enough credit for currently.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. My experience working in public health, all of the issues there. Yeah, everybody talks about healthcare as one of the key issues. Who's actually done the work? And, that gets a little frustrating sometimes. And that's okay to be frustrated. It is what it is. And we just recently, here in Philadelphia, we had an incident at one of our LGBTQ owned and operated bars, where a bouncer that is subcontracted through a security company punched somebody who was outside, who had just been put out of the club for being too drunk. And that punch ended up with that young man dying. And so everybody is on, everybody runs the social media and they give their opinion, or they give their thought or their criticism, or, whatever. And I haven't yet. I haven't said anything about it yet, but I've been doing the work behind the scenes, because one thing about me is that I don't jump on bandwagons. I'm not reactionary. I breathe. I take a minute. I try to talk with everybody involved so that I can figure out exactly what happened before I get involved, to see how I can help. And so now I'm getting called out on social media. Oh, at Deja for PA hasn't said anything. She, what kind of leader that's connected to the community hasn't responded to this? And I had an event there apparently right after the incident happened, but the incident wasn't public yet. And so they're talking about that. And my thing is this, that as a leader, you're not a follower. See, there's a difference between leaders and followers. Followers see somebody else post something, they start posting stuff. Everybody's talking and making a thing out of a situation, and they don't even know the facts. Or they also don't recognize that when you do something like that, what kind of harm it can cause.
Right. So, but we love to be the first ones to be right.
Yes,
we saw it before everybody else. I knew Steely Dan was a thing before Steely Dan was a thing.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And so even my comms manager is like, we got to get a statement out. I said, calm down. I'm not reactionary. I have a meeting as soon as we hang up from here. I have a meeting with the owner of the club and some of the protesters, people that had gone out and protested them. I set that up. I've been in talks with the security company that employed the young Black man that threw the punch. What people aren't thinking about is that when we do stuff like this, it affects so many lives, not just the victim. It's horrific what happened to him. He lost his life. Now a family is forever affected. Now a family of the person that threw the punch is forever affected. Now we have a bar that employs a lot of people, including Black and brown people. They do a lot of drag shows, and they employ a lot of the trans community there, and people make their living there. But people aren't thinking about that. While everybody's calling for a boycott, they're not thinking that you're putting Black and brown people out of work, which is the last thing we can afford to do in this country. While they're calling for the security company to be fired, everybody break their contracts with them. This security company employs several hundred Black and brown people. Now, do we put all of them out of work because what one did? And so
They
those
just
are the
came out of
things.
a pandemic. We're
Yeah,
just coming out of a pandemic.
yeah,
We're just finally getting out there again.
absolutely. And as someone who is seen as a leader, I act as a leader. Listen, you want to pay attention. My opponent wrote this thing on Facebook, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. They wrote this thing on Facebook. I'm busy behind the scenes on the phone, meeting with people, trying to figure out how do we not correct it, but how can we move forward in an empathetic, compassionate way while also making sure that we don't end up putting a bunch of people out of work, particularly Black and brown people.
Absolutely. I think
And
one of the biggest issues that, I especially like, we hear this a lot from the right side, is, everybody's out to just try and get their thing on the media, their thing on the media, their thing on the media. And the media really does contort a lot of things because, as we've talked about on here, outrage sells eyeballs.
yes,
And oftentimes, especially having worked in civil and criminal defense, these things are so much more nuanced than the 10-second sound clip that somebody's going to play and then eventually write this long tweet or Facebook post about.
mm-hmm.
And
Right.
so realistically, like, is it awful that a human life was lost? Yes,
Absolutely.
there's that, it's terrible, but at the same time too, it's like if you don't stem the outrage, there's going to be a lot more loss than just one life.
Yes.
And I don't mean that as just one life, because that life was precious, but there's going to be a lot more fallout. And having somebody actually work behind the scenes and try to bring community together is far more important than just making sure that your 10-second post is out there on the ether to get forgotten in 5 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And some bouncer is going to hold himself accountable for the rest of his life for that. That's what we said about Kyle Rittenhouse. In the end, alone in the dark, he's going to suffer his pains. And that's an issue. And he's going to adjust for that. That bouncer's never going to do that again. And nobody he knows will ever do that. And that's the accountability portion. It has to come from the point of contact on up. And then Deja's involvement to just be a neutral sort of listening board and sounding board, because breaking news solutions save lives, right? There's your organic viral moment. And those things, not all of that happens in public. And so
see, there are the people that post on their social media breaking news, and then but they're not the people that are actually doing the work. They're the people looking for that little 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 seconds to get that attention. And they're not concerned with, as you mentioned before, the fallout from this. So who's going to be affected if we continue moving in the direction that we're going right now? And that's going to be a lot of innocent people that need jobs, that have to support families, that have to pay their rent, that have to feed themselves. And I'm not somebody that's reactionary. I learned over the years that when something like this happens, you have to step back for a moment, take a breath, think it through, and then start moving forward. And unfortunately, we live in a time where a lot of people are like people were sending me the posts yesterday. They were like, look at this, you should respond. I'm like, I'm not responding to that. I don't have to respond. People saying, oh, someone who's supposed to be so connected. I have 2 decades worth of work to show how connected I am to the community. I don't have to prove it to them.
Right. There you go. And that's and what do most of these other people have in terms of connection to the community? How many of them have actually been a part of or actively been there as an advocate
making
or an
any
ally.
Change at all?
Right.
Exactly. Yes. It's really frustrating because you see this constantly. Oh, I'm so connected to the community, and then you'll vote these people in, and then they actively do things that you're like, I thought you were connected to this community. If you were, you would know that this is what we need, not whatever you're doing over there.
Compromise for the longer, better good. We're going to compromise on this point to get progress later.
Yeah, well, that's the problem is that if the compromise is I'm going to do whatever I want and thanks for voting for me, that's not compromise.
Exactly. The compromise is I want the attention, I want the soundbite, I want the acknowledgement, I want all of this, but I haven't put in the work to do that. I had news outlets contacting me, all through last week. And, I know a lot of them. So I took their call, but I said, I'll have to get back to you because right now I don't have a comment.
Right.
And it's because I'm not going to, everybody is already saying, oh, this is terrible. We have to do something. We have to. Why do you need one more person saying that?
Yeah.
You don't. What you need is someone working towards a solution. That's what you need.
I wish the chorus was solutions. People saying, why can we try this? Can we fund this? Can we do more of this instead of, So my initial thought was, can we have like a lounge area for people that are too drunk waiting for a ride home so that they're not the bouncer's responsibility outside? But that was just initially without even examining the situation. But if you had 100 people offering solutions like that, you would have a better choice than who to listen to about their outrage and anger.
Yep, exactly.
And a lot of times,
so that's what was on my mind today.
Hey,
a lot of
fantastic.
politicians are really good on Twitter stating something, but then if you ask them, and then what, they never respond. So what I do appreciate is you as a candidate coming here, because I believe there's a connection that needs to be made between representative and represented, and that's the communication thing. And so I really appreciate you being here. I don't know how to express that we're a friendly, fun audience. We just want to meet the people that are going to be representing us. And so there's a key phrase that's coming out, and I don't know who's starting it, but constituency interaction engagement is just this amazing thing. How are you? And what I always want to know is, how do you want the people that are voting for you to communicate with you once you are in office? What's the best way to go through the process instead of just going on Twitter and saying, fix my problem? You didn't fix my problem. How do you actually want to engage with people?
I want to be around. I want to be available just like I am now. Listen, on any given day, I'm walking down the street and I run into people. They're like, wait, and I'm like, but I'm here all the time. I'm at all the restaurants. I'm at the bars. I'm walking down the street. I'm going to the park. I'm doing the same thing that everybody else is in community. And I think that that's important too. I want people to, they're going to have to call the office. Yes, they're going to have to, depending on what the issue is, whether it's something they need to talk with me about, or whether it's one of my staff is going to be able to, get them what it is that they need. And one of the things that I've already built with my campaign staff who is going to go into office with me is that constituency services is a priority. And what I want is to make sure that we are a resource. So a lot of people don't know the difference between like what a state rep can do versus a city council person versus, somebody else. But what I want to make sure that my office does is that we have those resources and those connections. So even if it's not something we can do, we don't just say, well, here's a number, call them. We say, okay, so here's who can actually help with that. We will reach out to them first. We will then make that connection for you. And then we will also follow up to make sure that you got the help that you needed afterwards. And when you call or you send an email to the office, it will be a 24-hour turnaround. You will get a phone call back, whether it's from me or one of the staff, or an email back, whether it's from me or one of the staff. And then we will, move forward with trying to help you in whatever it is that we may or may not be able to help you with. I also want people to understand we're not miracle workers and we're not going to be able to fix everything. We're not going to be able to address everything. And some things are not going to happen immediately. It's unfortunately a very politics and bureaucracy are a very slow moving beast. But
nothing happens immediately, but you have to start the motion for it to ever get anywhere.
Right. And I tell people, I already work in constituency services.
Cool.
All the work that I do, when people call me, I need to get back to them quickly because I don't know what their situation is. They could be in danger. They could be extremely sick and need to see a doctor. They could, be starving, or be hungry and maybe not have eaten for the last 2 days. They may need medication. They may, there may be a problem with law enforcement. There may be like all of these issues. I'm kind of that resource that helps people get through it, whether it's with the police or probation and parole or court, or they need an immediate appointment with a doctor, or there's a prescription that ran out. They're not going to be able to see the doctor to get another prescription. So we need to be able to do that virtually and get it done quickly. Or they may need help paying for a prescription, whatever it is. there needs to be a quick turnaround time. And that's the work I've been doing for years. So it'll be the same way, going into my office. No, it will not just be me doing it, but I will make sure that we have a staff that is capable of doing it and understands that that is important and it's a priority.
Priority is constituencies.
Yes.
Cool.
Very much so.
Okay.
And, being part of the community to me is also, I have people that I've known 25 years that I still see all the time, and they always laugh and joke, and they're like, it's so funny because being around you now, you haven't changed that much from back then when we all used to run the streets and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm still me. That was me back then. That's me now. The only difference is I'm doing different work. And that's it. I don't have to just survive anymore. Now I'm trying to make sure I help other people thrive, not just survive.
It's important.
Yeah.
People are learning to think that survival is the baseline we need to deal with. What's up, Jeffrey?
Absolutely. You know what? I want to dig in on a couple of things with Deja, because I feel like, it's a rare chance that, everyday people get to ask some really tough questions, especially on the last leg of an election journey. And, we got a couple of major issues in this country right now. I'm going to start with the economic side, because I'm sitting here looking at your platform, and you've been out there, you've seen what's going on. So tell me, what is it that you're looking at when you're looking at the issue with economic opportunities in your area?
So in this particular district, there's a lot of businesses in this district. This is one of the highest income districts in the entire Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But there's a lot of small businesses here, people that don't live here, but they own a business here. And what I'm hearing from people right now is there are a lot of these businesses were hit very hard by the pandemic. Some of them were either too small, or there was some other disqualifying thing where they didn't have any access to the pandemic relief funds for what was supposed to be for small businesses.
Right.
We all know how that went. And now they have huge tax bills due, and they're terrified because they don't know how they're going to pay these taxes. And so I think we need to be taking another look at a pandemic relief plan that is strictly for these smaller businesses that didn't have access to the pandemic relief funds. I think that, and one of those things is, honestly, it's just tax relief. But we have to be very careful that we're giving tax relief to the actual small businesses. We make these tax relief things too general, and then the larger companies or larger businesses can access them. No, this needs to be for the people that are, maybe they only have 6 employees, or it's just them and their spouse, or them and their partner, or them and, a family member running the business. They lost their income and their livelihood too.
Yeah.
But now they still owe taxes.
And $50 billion of that relief that was going to go to small businesses rolled back into the next bill because nobody used it, because nobody knew how to access it. And
also, not only that, but the majority of that pandemic, those trillions of dollars, went to big companies. Big companies were getting those big checks.
Yeah.
And I feel like there should also be some accountability. I think
they knew how to access. They have the lawyers to access.
So even if they accessed it, I think they should not be eligible for the loan forgiveness. I feel like those larger companies should have to repay that loan. Like some of the smaller businesses are eligible for the loan forgiveness. I don't think those larger businesses, we can't go back and say, hey, you shouldn't have got it, whatever.
Right. But going forward.
Yeah, but going forward, I think that we need to make sure that, no, they don't get the loan forgiveness. Nope, you have to pay it back. I'm not saying we can't work out a payment plan with them, but no, they should not get that money free and clear. And we should be offering tax relief to these small mom and pop, what we'll call mom and pop businesses,
right,
that are still suffering. And now they may have survived the pandemic, and now they may end up going out of business because they have a large tax bill.
And that's the thing is like, that's not an issue that's unique to just your district. I mean, out here in Olympia, Washington, we saw the same thing happen where, you'd have these large companies that came and they got all of these huge loans from, the PPP, but these small companies struggled to even, get anybody on the phone to help them
Yeah.
apply for this stuff.
Right.
And then, after 2 years of, after a year of limited availability, you saw a mass shuttering of businesses. And those who didn't shutter were already just dancing on the edge.
Yeah.
And the fact is that without, the rollback of a lot of these, lockdown metrics, those businesses would have gone under too. And ultimately, I think that was partially part of the driver of why we saw things open up the way that we did. And we did these weird
Yeah.
targeted openings and closings. It's because we lost so many small businesses that will never be recovered. And we're about to lose many, many more.
Yeah.
So I do agree that, a lot of these companies that post record, they're large organizations, they post record profits year after year. And, like, for example, when the Lakers got a small business loan, I'm like, I'm sorry, the Lakers are a small business?
Well, I think that's the other thing, right? Like, we can go back and track whoever got this money. And we need to just put that up against the list of the corporations that did report record profits.
Mm-hmm.
And say, wait a minute, so they got money during this? Also, we're not looking at the price gouging that's happening right now.
Yeah, there's that.
Everybody's using the excuse of, oh, it's the pandemic. So everything has jumped by, in price by 30% or 40%, depending on the item. Mm-hmm. And yet their profit margins aren't down. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's another thing. Like, we, during the pandemic, I remember a lot of these small little local corner stores that had masks and had hand sanitizer, and they were selling it for $10 and $15. Boy, they went right up in there and shut them down. But these big companies that are price gouging the entire country are getting away with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's essentially, it comes down to like a too big to regulate, or too many donors to regulate or something. That's pretty much. I've always joked, but it's become less and less of a joke. I think most of us would be fine with lawmakers getting lobbied the way that we do if they wore jackets like they did in NASCAR and they show us who all their sponsors are, and that way we can go, yeah, that one, okay, you're sponsored by them, I can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
I used to think so, and then Katie Porter said, I proudly don't take donor money from lobbyists, and I said, so it can be done. So no,
it can be
I
done.
no longer agree, but that's a national issue to me. Is that a local problem?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
So money in politics, the way that money is raised, who it's raised from, who has access to it, who gets backed, that absolutely is a problem. We do need to change some of these policies when it comes to raising money, because we have too many, like you said, lobbyists, and too many corporations and companies and churches and all of them that are investing all these money in candidates so that these candidates will do their bidding. And, let's talk about religion for a minute. Let's talk about separation of church and state.
Ooh, hi, Jeffrey.
Hey.
Any church that has anything to say publicly, politically, should be paying taxes, period.
I don't disagree. That's the thing is, again, that's actually very common in other countries where, if churches are involved politically, they're getting taxed on it. Personally, I'm the kind of person where I very strongly view that religion and state need to be separated, for the greater good of society. And to me,
that's not just a belief, it's in our Constitution.
Well, it's supposed to be, but here we are.
Yeah, but all those same people that are always screaming, our Constitution, until you say, what about separation of church and state? And then they're like, oops.
Well, not mean? Like that.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think politicians should be able to run off of religious values.
I
wish that they wouldn't.
Well, and it's
supposed to be separation of church and state. So your religious values should not be pushed upon everybody else.
like, and I think, I don't really have a whole lot of great things to say about Joe Biden, but I have more positive things to say than the last administration. And realistically, growing up Catholic, knowing Joe Biden's Catholic, I guarantee you that, Joe Biden is probably very much anti-abortion, but in his career public policy,
Yes.
he's very much,
Pro-choice.
pro-choice. And I think a lot of people tend to forget, it's like, that's how you separate the religious and the state part of it, is that, in his view, it is not government's responsibility to determine what a person can and can't do with their body. From a
Right.
religious aspect, damn good and well that he's on the same boat and believes that abortion is a terrible thing. It's just that he has reconciled that with the idea of separation in church and state.
Which is what a politician is supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like we as a society are pro-choice. Like, it doesn't matter who we as the individual are. For the greater good, we as a society are pro-choice because we're always marching towards equality, or the hope and dream or fairy tale of it, and trying to achieve it is the goal, not going backwards. I was thinking that today, like, if Republicans just spent as much time and effort creating an inclusive party as they do trying to like wedge everybody apart, they would be a grand old party,
Who, the Republicans?
Yeah, if they spent more time if they spent more time building a tent as they do isolating people out of it, and the money they spend just trying to divide us, if they spent all that for a greater good, they would be a greater party,
But I have a pushback for that. The money they spend to divide us, the Democrats on the left.
Right.
They are united in what they are trying to do.
Agreed.
Their money is well spent because they succeed in dividing us. Because just like there's the extreme right, there's the extreme left. And the extreme left, the super progressives, the moral, code of the Democrats, of the left side, are very much the same way. You either fall in line or we ostracize you and we go up against you.
Or we're going to beat you with flagpoles. I don't think there's a real comparison. Antifa climbed the Statue of Liberty to raise awareness. Like, the right doesn't do that. They're
But what I'm saying though is that the Republicans do succeed in coming together to divide us. And the thing is, I'm not going after you because we don't align 100%. That's my point. Like, I'm not going, do I agree with some of the tactics from even Antifa? No. Do I agree?
I agree.
Do I disagree with some of their tactics? Yes. Do I agree with a lot of their tactics? Yes.
I just don't like the other sidesism, because one side is trying to play within the rules and voice their complaints, and one is trying to change the rules without permission. So I don't like the radical equalization, because they're not. It's the difference between an undercooked steak and a poisonous steak to me.
Well,
I don't want either one.
Both of them can make you sick.
Right. Exactly.
Both of them
I don't want either one, but I definitely don't want the poisonous one.
No, and that's the thing, though. That's the thing, is that we are spending so much time fighting with each other that we're not coming together to fight the real war. We're busy battling with each other. And like, I don't want to fight with anybody on the left just because we don't agree on every single thing, or because you don't like the way that I do things. Like, okay, all of my work with the police, comes out of me and my community being abused for decades by the police.
Agreed.
For decades.
Agreed.
My advocacy started when I pushed back one night after a fight with the police. After years and years and years of being harassed mentally and emotionally, physically attacked, run over with bikes, almost run over with cars, beat up, falsely arrested, all of that stuff. And so I saw that, okay, we have to make a change in here. And so I've spent a lot of years helping make that change from inside. But there are people that are further on the left that come out against me, and push against me and do all of that. Oh, she's aligned with the police. And it's like, wait a minute, hold on. I'm not aligned with them. What I'm aligned with is while everybody's on the outside screaming and yelling, I'm the one that gets the phone call at 3:00 in the morning when someone gets arrested, or when someone is being harassed by the police, or if there's a murder that has happened and the police aren't dealing with it correctly. I'm the one that takes those phone calls, and then I pick up the phone and start calling people. And then I have meetings. Then I get everybody on the same page, and then I get the ball moving in the right direction. And oftentimes, it's just simply once people know somebody that has a little bit of a say-so or is seen as having a little bit of power, or whatever, is watching what they're doing, they do it right. And
yes, accountability,
I
transparency.
absolutely believe there's a place for the people that are outside on bullhorns, screaming and yelling, climbing, whatever, doing all of those things. I absolutely believe in their right, and that there's a place for that. But I have chosen, because of my lived experience, to look out for the people that are still caught up in these systems that we're going after.
Agreed.
And to help make a change from the inside. And I don't think that we should be at war with each other because I'm not doing it your way or you're not doing it my way. As long as our end goal is the same, right? Like we're all trying to get to the same destination. We're just taking different routes.
Right.
Yep.
And that's okay. And so that's what I mean, when I do say stuff like that, Jason, it's because I have experienced it myself.
It's not left, right. It's more tax bracket. When you're going up to somebody to solve a problem, it doesn't matter their political designation. You need them to solve the problem.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And that's the other thing. I get people that ask me all the time, well, how are you going to work with people that are fighting for legislation against you? And I said, well, I've been doing it for 2 decades now.
It's no different. What are you gonna do? What we're watching in the current the federal climate is exactly that issue. They're not working together, and everybody's getting pissed off at each other. Yeah. And here we are at the midterms, and you see a very real chance that things could swing towards the Republican side in the House. The fact of the matter is that when people don't work together, you don't get anything done. And when people don't get anything done, they're like, well, screw it, I guess we're going to try this other side here and see if they'll get anything done.
Yeah.
Or just not at all.
Yeah. That's
just tune out.
A lot of people that voted for Trump that I have talked to, that's what they said. In the beginning, they voted for him because they thought, oh, here's something different. Maybe he'll be able to get things done. And it turned into a shit show, but
he made some accomplishments. He did some things. It's just he was such a shit show that nobody wanted to support that.
Well, it's that whole broken clock is right twice a day.
Right.
And that's the thing
exactly.
is, like, you can get a couple of things right and still have the majority of what you do just be completely off the wall.
Completely wrong. Like, listen, like the pandemic I don't believe would have reached the level that it reached if we had real leadership.
Thank you.
In the White House.
Thank you. If we didn't have monitoring overseas, it wouldn't have. It would have came here. We would have known what it was before it got here.
Yeah. Exactly.
And as Jason and I have talked about, one of the bigger things that Trump got right was cutting the red tape on making sure we could get the vaccines moving forward as fast as possible. But outside of that, this whole don't do anything, just let it run its course, or, in some cases, drink fucking bleach.
Oh, yeah.
It was just like, what is happening?
Yeah.
It wasn't leadership. It was like, somebody thinking they're the smartest person in the room and having exactly zero qualifications. And I think that's what it highlighted for a lot of people looking at politicians, people who thought, we see a bunch of people who think they're the smartest person in the room, and they have exactly zero experience in the shit that they're trying to legislate.
That's right.
It really is frustrating.
Tell me what part of Deja's life Donald Trump even knows exists. You know what I mean?
None at all.
What is it like to be a Latino in America? Oh my gosh. What's it like to be a transgender person in America? Oh my gosh. What's it like to be an advocate for all of that down on the ground?
Yeah. That's why I'm like, people are like, well, Deja, I just don't know, because, it's going to be difficult for you in Harrisburg. And I don't know that you're going to be able to handle it. And I said, oh, well, Okay, well, that's, the funny thing is, me from all of my work. How do you think I managed to get all of that done? I got all of that done because I know how to work with people like that. I know that, I knew walking into these rooms originally 2 decades ago, these spaces were not places that people ever saw a transgender person and never wanted one in there. And here I am in these spaces. I didn't go in there. I wasn't combative. I wasn't screaming and yelling and throwing things and saying, you're going to listen to me. I went in there. I listened to what was going on, assessed the situation, figured out the best way that I could help in this space, who I could build a relationship with, who I needed to give the time to adjust to me being there. And that's what happened. I ended up building all of these incredible relationships because I had to put my personal emotions and feelings. Quick story. One of my biggest abusers in the Philadelphia Police Department in the 90s and early 2000s, I now work with on a regular basis with community stuff. Whether it's during the holidays, providing, meals and stuff for communities, whether it's clothing drives, whether him and his wife just have a bunch of clothes they're trying to get rid of. When I did the food distribution for the undocumented immigrant communities during the pandemic, he gathered a bunch of other officers up to help me unload and load the trucks and vehicles. And so I had to work with this. I'll never forget the feeling I had when I'm sitting across the table from him when I first started doing this work. And he started talking and I looked at him and I realized who it was. I can't even describe the sensation that went through my body because everything in me wanted to jump up and start throwing chairs.
I understand that.
This is a man that abused me so horribly for years. That at one point, like my own family was begging me to leave Philadelphia because they were afraid I was going to end up dead, that the police were going to kill me. That's how bad it was. And now here I am sitting across the table from this man in a different capacity. But I had to give him an opportunity. I had to see what he was talking about. And so it was a slow, it was a slow process. But now we have this friendship. I had 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, I was walking home. It was like 3:30 in the morning. I had just finished work and there was a big fight get ready to break out on one of the blocks walking home. I called him. He was home in bed, but he answered the phone for me. He's like, hey, you okay? What's going on? And I was like, hey, are you on duty? He's like, no, I'm home. I'm like, okay, can you call somebody else? Because there's a big fight brewing right at the corner of this and this. And so if somebody gets there before it gets bad. And so,
that's how you solve this stuff, is by getting there before it gets bad.
Yes. But to think that I call this man at 3:30 in the morning and he sees it's me and he answers the phone to make sure I'm okay or see what I need or is somebody in trouble. That shows that, yes, in the 90s and the early 2000s, he was horrible. He definitely, had a bias towards our community, but he's grown and changed. And we have to give space for people to grow and change if they are willing to.
So this is something that gets talked about, especially a lot in our house, is restorative justice. Have you two ever sat down and had the conversation of what your lives were like in the 90s and 2000s and how you got to where you are now? Have you two had that conversation?
No, we haven't sat down and had that conversation. And, the committee that I was a part of, at one point, whenever the deputy commissioner of police, or if there was a new high-ranking police official that would attend one of the meetings, I would use him and I as an example. And I would say, hey, here's an example of the work that we do. And I would say, listen, this guy was horrible to me back in the day. And now here we are solving things together. And at one point, the head of the committee, before I ended up heading it up, had came to me and they were like, listen, you have to stop doing that. And I was like, excuse me? They said, you have to stop because you're throwing him under the bus. I said, I'm not throwing him under the bus. I'm trying to make sure these high-ranking officials understand that the work we're doing is real and that it's important, because this is the relationship we used to have. Now here we are working together to solve problems.
This is the example. Example.
Yes. And so I was God, I was so angry, but I didn't respond in the moment because I wanted to. I wanted to be like, you know what? You can F all the way off. How dare you tell me? Because that is what I experienced. You didn't have to experience that. And then,
Right.
like a week or two later, the person called me. They were like, you know what? I owe you an apology for saying that to you. That was wrong. And I said, well, thank you. I appreciate that. But, everybody knows I'm not trying to throw them under the bus.
Yeah, it's a time and place thing.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's one of the greater issues that we're experiencing now too, is the idea that somebody can be a real shithead, back in the day, be abusive, be a monster, but are they capable of growth, and are they deserving of that, forgiveness and that inclusion into communities that they abused?
Right.
And I mean, that's neither here nor there for someone like me to be able to discuss. I think it's all about how a person comes in and tries to not right their past wrongs, but grow, so
Yes.
that way they show others how to do it properly.
Yeah, a lot of it is they do not know. Some of it is it's who they are, but most of it is they just do not know. And I always thought long form conversation like this would let people listen and then realize, oh, there's a transgender person that doesn't have devil horns that's trying to eat me, or whatever it is they think that transgender people are. They can listen and they can be like, oh, she's cool. Okay. So when they encounter you in person, they're like, hey, you're cool. That's how they come into it, So I
You know
really
what? It's funny. I just had that situation with a big union leader here who, of course, we know who each other is, but we had never interacted with each other. And we happened to be in the same space. They endorsed my opponent, and they were coming in saying hi to everybody. And so I was being a little bit of a smart ass, and I reached my hand out and I was like, hey, and I said his name, Deja. And he just looked at me. He was like, Deja, like, I don't know who you are. And I started laughing. I said, hey, just want to make sure, like just kind of trying to open up the line of communication, because you endorse my opponent, but like there's no need for us to be uncomfortable with each other.
right. When you win, you're gonna have to work with them anyway.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So we ended up talking, and there was a few things exchanged. We went back and forth a little because he is in a very powerful position. I think he thought maybe that I was
Groveling.
Not as quick on my feet as I am.
Ah.
And so we had a few exchanges, and then he kind of started laughing, and then he pulls up a chair and he sits down and we start talking. And then like towards the end of the conversation, looks at me and goes, you know what? He goes, you're not what I thought you were going to be. And I started laughing. I said, oh, really? He was like, yeah. He said, you know how you hear some things about people, and then so you kind of have this notion of who they're going to be. I said, I get that a lot.
Yep.
He goes,
yep.
Yeah. He was like, yeah, I like you. He's like, you don't give a F. And I said, no, I give as good as I get. I'm not afraid of anyone. Like,
of course you give an F. It's just what you give an F about.
Right. Exactly. And so, now him and I are cool. Like now we've had that interaction and we exchanged a few jabs and, joked around with each other. And it, he's like, I like you. And I was like, well, thank you. Like, and that's
what you have to do. That's what you have to, that's your role in life. That's your cross to bear, is to be the first one to walk. I'm visually impaired, and it's my cross to bear to walk up and hear people say, so you're blind, huh? And have to repeat the same thing ad nauseum to 50 people at a party. It's your cross to bear to just do that. And so you're making the path easier for the people that follow, is the way I say it to my disabled friends. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. That's the whole idea. It's the whole idea. So listen, I'm never going to get rich being in politics.
I'm interested in education, but I'm wondering if Jeffrey has any better questions.
Well, I mean, I've got a lot of questions, and we only have you for about another 10 minutes, I think. So
unless Deja wants to stay longer, that's up to them.
Yeah. If Deja wants to stay longer, absolutely. But I think honestly, like hearing how we bring community together, especially like for some of the things that we've talked about. Food security is a big one for me. It's always been a huge one. It's something that we talk about frequently, and to me, especially knowing that reading so many scientific articles about how when you have access to proper number of meals, kids perform better, adults perform better. You have fewer people getting into trouble because you have regular access to food. I mean, there's a book called Food for Peace, and the whole premise of the book is that countries are less likely to destabilize their leaders when they have reliable access to food.
Who knew?
Right? And so
Who knew?
imagine, and this is a military tactic book, for crying out loud. So the idea that you wouldn't see that on a community level where, if you had reliable access to food, you would have a lot fewer issues. And so I guess in your experience, where do you see food insecurity at in all of the issues that you have literally borne witness to?
So food insecurity definitely plays a big part of it, but it's, again, I say that that's the difference between surviving, right? Like when people are in survival mode constantly, all the time, trying to find a place to lay their head, trying to find something to eat, trying to, be warm, trying to get out of the rain, whatever it is that they're trying to do. If that is what they spend their life doing, they never learn like the life skills, the skills on how to live. So if we just provide these resources to people, it allows people the space to kind of grow and become what what a lot of people would say is, a productive citizen. And I don't like that term myself, but I use it because other people recognize it. It's really hard to be productive when you spend every day trying to figure out what you're going to eat, where you're going to lie your head, make sure you're not getting arrested, make sure you're not getting attacked by people just walking down the street because they may recognize that you're a trans person, or, making sure, like, a lot of undocumented immigrant people are targets of crimes.
Survival is exhausting.
Yeah, because people know that they are afraid to go to the police. So I have also spent a lot of my time building those relationships so that when something does happen, I had to walk a young man into special victims a couple of months ago, who had been the victim of basically like a date rape, and nobody knows about his sexuality, so he couldn't have them come to his home. He couldn't, so I had to arrange all of this stuff so that he could still report the crime, because it was a crime and this person was probably targeting other people. And when you are someone that is so marginalized that the laws are against you, access to healthcare is against you, access to jobs is against you, how do we expect them to then go down the right path? One of the things I say right now, what we need to restore to these communities where we're seeing all this gun violence, we need to restore hope, because they've lost hope. And that is exactly why they are on the path that they are. And it is not their fault that they lost hope. It is our fault as a society that we do not prioritize making sure that the most marginalized have access to the resources necessary to live an actual fulfilling life.
Yeah. But with food diversity, right? Food security isn't enough. We need food diversity. Do you have food deserts in your area?
So, no, not in my district. Absolutely not. Like I said, this is a very high-end district, but in other parts of the city. However, I will say this, and I'm not plugging anybody, but I happen to be friends with this man now. We built a great relationship. His name is Jeffrey Brown, and he opened up several ShopRites and fresh grocers around the city, and he targeted those food deserts. He targeted the most marginalized areas, and it was a smart move. It was a smart business move. It was a great community move. He's constantly supporting different ideas and all of that, so that we didn't have those food deserts around the city anymore. But yes, I will say this. I credit Jeffrey Brown with helping to all but eliminate food deserts around the city of Philadelphia.
Jeffrey, we want to talk to you. Come on Public Access America, because we love solutions like that.
I'll send it over to, I'll send him the email information, or send you guys his email, and you can contact him.
Having food in your belly solves so many problems,
Yeah.
like a living wage would.
Well, and that's the other thing. He's working on job programs. He's working on, making sure that his people at least make $12 to $13 an hour minimum.
I like it.
And then have access to getting to that $15, $20 an hour point. All that, like this man he's smart, he's empathetic, he's compassionate. He is someone that, while not being marginalized himself, has a real open mind and heart to those that are marginalized and how to fix situations. Okay, enough about Jeff Brown, but I will connect you guys for sure, because he'd be a great person to have on the show.
I love it.
For me, it's, these solutions, spreading that information to all corners of the country, that's the kind of stuff that helps fix certain problems, so that way we can prioritize other ones. And
that's right.
And to me, like someone like you, Deja, who's like, oh yeah, I know a person who has done this. Oh, I know a person who, people like you are what help. You're the kind of person who brings community together in ways that, a lot of people only talk about.
Yeah. I'm a firm believer in that. And it's worked well for its purpose. It's caused me a lot of flack, but it achieves its purpose. And as long as I stay focused on my purpose and what the purpose of this work is, I'm okay. The moment I lose focus of that, it's time for me to step to the side. So that's why I don't, even earlier when I was telling you about those posts on Facebook and stuff, like, yeah, I could have responded and been like, yeah, you're a jerk. What do you actually do for the community? And I hope they hear this, because they know who they are.
That's so funny. like Facebook has any relevance in today's society.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so like,
funny.
Fake internet points don't solve problems.
Yeah.
I posted on my whatever.
Yeah.
I just don't, it's not social media anymore. Things are slowly evolving, and I don't think a lot of people are seeing it.
And no, I don't want to say they're evolving. I want to say they're devolving.
I would agree with Deja.
Evolving. I believe in the positive side of life. Shiva might rush us from one place to another, and it might seem chaotic, but we're going to land where we need to be.
You know what? You sound a little bit like me. People always say, well, why don't you? And I'm like, listen, I believe firmly in the universe and energies and, all that kind of stuff. And the universe is going to guide me to where I need to be. And
that cop proves my theory, that you over time wore them down with just who you were, and everything normalized and empathy was created, even from the people that don't like you. So where can people support you? I have you on Twitter, right, at Deja4PA, Deja FORPA.
Yes, and it's the same on Instagram, it's the same on Facebook, and then it's dejaforpa.com as well. So on my social media, all except for Twitter, I have my personal and then my political or, professional page, which is at Deja for PA. And then my personal is just my name, Deja Alvarez.
Will you promise to come back?
Absolutely. Will you promise to have me again? Hopefully after I win the election.
Hopefully you're a representative and we're congratulating you, but in either case, you're there solving problems. I hope you're there to expand your abilities, because I love who you are. I don't like politicians. I like representatives. You know what I mean?
It's true. So, I'm in the same boat.
So
yeah, I agree with you. I definitely agree with you.
All right. Thank you. I know you have a meeting next, so I'm just going to leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, Deja.
So good meeting you both. I hope to see you both soon.
Next month.
You will. You will see us again soon.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And that was interesting. Thank you for listening to Public Access America. You can find us anywhere you find your favorite podcasts, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. For our disabled listeners, try Victor Reader, Audible, or ask your smart device to play the episode. And you can check out our live streams every Sunday, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Thanks for being here. And we're back at Public Access America. Welcome to our Thursday episode. Hey, Jeff. Oh, he's Jeffrey. I'm Jason. Moving on, because that's obvious. How are you doing today?
It's supposed to be a sunny day. I'm gonna do a little bit of garden work just to kind of get some of the weeds cleared up. And I don't know, since it's supposed to be so nice, I might find myself an outdoor patio to go have lunch. So
I like it. Sometimes getting in the dirt just focuses you in a way that you can't do otherwise,
yeah, no, and especially like because it's been so busy lately. Like I just have not had the chance to do much of anything.
Mm.
It's like my communication has just been absolute garbage. And like it's one of those things, like I don't think people realize, like when you have people who are severely short staffed, it can often lead to other problems in other places, and those other
Yeah.
problems can be things like it's like it takes me a lot to get my brain to shut off after work sometimes, because I've got so much to do, but because I'm doing other things I can't get the things that I need to done. So my brain is like, okay, how am I going to tackle this?
Yeah.
It's I'm one of those people, like it's like I can figure out how to do 8 hours worth of work in an hour and get it done properly,
Hmm.
but there's only so much of that I can condense down, and then it starts to build up and build up and build up.
Yeah.
And that gets tough, because then it's like, I'm not closing this program and shutting it. I just have little pieces of program running everywhere, for computer people who
Yep.
know this. It's like my brain just will not quit, and it makes it really difficult, but
I get
I'm
it.
starting to get there, hopefully. it's
My
been
mind,
it's
my
been a
mind is
journey.
doing that right at this moment because we just finished that interview, and I spent 3 days being like nervous that we were gonna do or say something, and now it's over. And while you're talking about that, my brain is going,
I could have asked this, I could have asked this. Well, and,
yeah,
and I think,
of course.
I think that's one of the things that, I would say advice for other candidates or other candidates to be out there that, eventually decide that they're going to run in their district and things like that. You know, you rarely get the chance to have these long form conversations and
Mhm.
not just end up with a sound clip, of, okay, here's a question, quick, give me 10 seconds of response and we'll clip that for you.
Yeah, I hate question answer.
Well, it's not even, I don't even call it question answer, because if your answer, it's, you think about like your school essays that you had to write on those tests. It's like you couldn't just write a sentence and have that be satisfactory. and
Right.
and and a lot of these questions are much the same way. You can't just be like, hey, what are your thoughts on economic opportunity? Everybody should have it. Okay, cool, moving on.
Right.
That's because you have to be able to state, like we talk about in anything, you have to be able to state the problem back for what it is,
Yeah.
and then be able to talk about how you, number one, how we got to that point, but then number two, what are your solutions that fix those issues? And
Yeah.
realistically speaking, you're not going to get a 10-second soundbite out of that. You might have a 2-minute clip. And guess what? With the rise of, places like TikTok or Instagram Reels or anything like
Mhm.
that, we have an opportunity to give people more time on their soundbite and be able to
Yeah.
give them the chance to get the words out that they need to get out, and not just the, okay, here's your feel good sentiment, yay,
I know. How do you feel about education? I approve
good.
of it. And that's the thing. Like, we didn't get to talk about legalization of marijuana or education, but you got to the economics, which got to the fundamental community interaction that we wanted to talk about.
Right.
I'm tired of, like, Memlo Oz is running to be senator of Pennsylvania. He's never lived there. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
so I love the community interaction. I don't need a
Hmm.
politician. Politicians seem to be like, I have no other special skill, so I'm going to get this job for life and hope that I keep it. But Deja will be fine. Like, the community they'll lose out a little bit because her reach won't be as broad, but they'll be working on things. And we didn't even get to talk about sex work. I mean, they touched on so many things. I didn't think it was good to
Right.
necessarily throw that all at an audience at once, but there's
Well,
so many things I wanted to talk about
oh,
with them.
absolutely. I wanted to talk about guns and
Yeah.
Deja's experience, and especially like where, my viewpoint on guns and things
Mhm.
like that. Like, but I think this is one of those things where, I think oftentimes we, even us, even me still, it's like, all right, cool, let's talk about all of these things. You think about that hour went by really fast, and we really only talked about basic history
Yeah.
of her experience. We talked about
Our fights, a
we talked
cop.
about our we talked about our what we see going on a little bit. We
Mhm.
talked about economic experience and how that's impacting. We talked a bit about how personal growth, and even to some extent a bit of restorative justice, and
Yeah.
in a way that people don't necessarily think about. The fact that I have to quote this because I mean it is real. It's a real thing that I have to think about all the time. In Skyrim, there's an interaction with one of the characters in the storyline named Parthenax, a dragon. Now, um, this group wants Parthenax killed. He's a dragon. Dragons are quote unquote inherently evil, and by and large, the interaction of most people with dragons in Skyrim is just that, inherently evil.
Oh,
Parthenax has been an actual voice for another group, the Greybeards, in teaching them how to live peacefully. Uh, and he says this line, and I'll never forget it, which is better, to have always been good or to have overcome your evil ways? And I think it's something that I actually think about a lot, because let's be real honest, none of us here are ever going to be able to say that we were good 100% of the time. And even for some of the people out there that have done some awful things, the question is have you been able to overcome your evil things? And you can put that into so many different contexts. You can put that into so many different experiences,
uh-huh.
like people who have gone to prison for doing terrible things, or doing some terrible things. you know if we truly believe in rehabilitation, then we have to truly believe that people can overcome. Otherwise, all you're looking for is somebody who's always been good, and you're never actually going to find that, because there are a lot of people that are really good at hiding their evil ways.
Or it's a tightrope. To be good is a tightrope. Like right now, we're offending somebody. And
Oh, I
that's the
guarantee it.
issue. And so being true to yourself, I always say if I can live with my decisions, then I can go forward. And if not, then I have to fix that. Cause I'll wake up 5 years from then at 3 in the morning going, so
I tell
I try not to hurt people. And I do that by not expecting anything from them or judging
right.
them for their decisions or assuming that their life is for me. If Jeffrey makes a decision and I happen to get screwed by that, that's not necessarily because Jeffrey's life involved screwing me. It might have been that he went a certain direction and I felt the wake of that, but that's normal in relationships.
And I mean, realistically, on top of that is oh, I lost it.
Yeah, I
um
know. I'm sorry. I
Damn it.
babble.
Shit. I mean, realistically, like, people do things that they later come to regret.
Uh-huh.
People have experiences that they then learn and grow from. And you know you're right, there's a lot of us out there that have done things, and it was never our intention to
Right.
do wrong by somebody. But at the same time, it's like, well, shit, that happened, and that sucks, and I have
Mhm.
to, number one, live with it, number two, learn and grow from it. And
If a buzz saw was running and I walked into it, that's not the buzz saw's problem.
that's
That's
exactly
buzz saw's fault.
so.
But I did love that Deja thing. And I didn't even get to talk about disabilities. My friend Jay lives in Philadelphia and he's blind and he has a great intern job. That's why that show stopped. He got a great job doing other things. And so I didn't even get to talk a lot about a lot of things that I had in my note because yes, it's like surfing one of those conversations. You don't know where it's going to go. And I love that. I'm
I
up
remember
for
what I
it.
was going to say.
Oh, good.
So, like, for someone like Deja, if Deja, if she gets the opportunity to move up and
Mhm.
be a representative, you said, the community will miss out, but there will always be somebody that is able to, step into that role.
I hope so.
and
Yeah.
and I think, that's one of those things where, if somebody were to come to Deja and say, hey, I know that you left some big shoes to fill, but I'd like to take my shot at it. Can you
Yeah.
show me the ropes? Deja would be the kind of person that would be like, all right, I'll give you all the information I can, and you just come to
Mhm.
me when you need something.
Agreed.
And
And
that's what we want is that, you want that growth. You want people who have managed to bring community together to take that next step and try to bring larger community together.
yes.
And there are people that are going to be capable of it, and there are people that aren't. And you know, from the sounds of it, whatever path Deja ends up on, she will
Right.
be doing great work,
Right.
for the
Agreed.
community. Period. End of story.
She'll still be who she is, but she'll have access to guide funds in a better way, And I like that idea that she'll be in the state house, directing some of these resources that orgs get, that these resources get. We didn't even get to talk about homelessness and all
No,
these things I'm sure that she's an expert on. So I can't wait to get them back on. And talking about food insecurity and diversity. I think that's
right.
where we were going with that. Like,
Yeah, I think that's where, that's a direction that we were going to head. And
yeah,
I think she'll be the first person to say that, the conversation is a lot more nuanced.
of
And
course. Yeah.
there will be a lot that, you know, we have a limited understanding and a limited experience, but being able to talk to her and hear those stories and hear those experiences
Yeah.
and learn from her how to connect all of these different pieces, so that way you get
Mm,
a more positive community response. It's not that, things are, good, maybe,
right.
but from the sounds of it, it sounds like things were a lot better than they used to be. And sometimes that's,
Mm,
even as Deja said, you're not going to change this stuff overnight, but
right.
sometimes you have to understand where you were and where you are now, and realize that, yeah, by today's standards it might not be good, but if you look at where things were 20 years ago, shit, it's a
Mhm.
different world. And I've had a lot of those conversations, like, for example, talking about, we got on the subject of RuPaul here in the house. um,
Nice.
the kids and I did, and I said, 20 years ago when I saw people like RuPaul and Eddie Izzard on TV, it was shocking, and there was, certainly plenty of upheaval about it, but it was a new world because at that point you now had people being represented on television that had not really been represented before.
That's
and
right.
and now, 20 years later, my kids tell the story of how they had a teacher that was like, talking about drag races, and most of the class went, wait, RuPaul's Drag Race? What? That doesn't make any
Right.
sense. And the teacher's like, no, 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 like race car drag races. And everybody's like, huh? Wait, this is a thing? And I'm like
right.
laughing hysterically because, 20 years ago, a drag race to me was something that happened in Brainerd, Minnesota. It wasn't RuPaul's Drag Race. And to
Right.
watch how, that acceptance has shifted in a lot of ways is a real testament to how some things have changed. Like I said, it is definitely not where you want it to be,
Mm. Yeah.
but compared, it is better than it ever was. And I think that's exciting.
Yeah. We
And of
want we
course, there's
want people we want people that want to know. We want people that want to know about RuPaul, and that's it. We don't know. We all don't know everything, but if we can learn it before we encounter it, we'll be nicer to it when we do meet it. And that's what's important. My friends all talk about I Am Jazz, like that changed their lives. Now they understand. They can put a face to transgender that isn't the demon that some people say they are. So I love that our audience doesn't know everything, but our audience is willing to at least hear us out. you
Oh
know?
hell, and we'll be the first to admit that we don't know everything. I mean,
Well,
as you've seen, there are some things that I won't talk about simply because it's like I don't know enough to have an opinion on
yeah,
this.
I know. And I
And
love throwing them out there so that Debbie behind you goes, what?
what the hell,
But
you
yeah,
know?
no, there's things I won't talk about either because they're a trigger for me. When I think in Ukraine about children being raped in front of their families, I don't talk about that enough because I don't like it. It triggers me in a way that I don't like feeling, you know. So I know.
Well, yeah, it's really it's so frustrating.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry.
what
I
do
don't
you
know
what
why
do
I
you
went that direction.
what do you got? What do you got for me this week,
I
Jason?
got jack shit. I got nothing.
Oh well, that's fun.
I don't know
Let's roll
why.
with that. Let's roll with that. Let's roll with that. That's fine.
I have a bunch of lying liars or lying liars stuff here and communication and
Yeah,
about a bunch of long stuff, but I just didn't know if we were gonna. I figured we would roll with Deja, you know what I mean?
absolutely. And I think that's, I think the reps that are going to do the best, whether you're looking at state, whether you're
Mhm.
looking at federal, senators the same way, people are tired, and much like, the experiment with Donald Trump, people are tired of politicians. They want actual
Yes.
representation. And I think that as different people, there's a reason why Sanders campaigns have been as successful as they are, and that's because he in some ways gets into the roots of the community and
Mhm.
here's some of those issues.
Or at
Now,
least he seems to.
well, and I mean, like, he has a grasp on the meta concepts. It's stuff that he's had issues with, and I do believe that there are Republican representatives out there that can do much the same. I grew up with, for example, in Montana, I had people like um, John
John
Tester.
John Tester is amazing, dude. I just saw him on TV talking about the farmers being squeezed out by
Yep.
larger farms. John Tester is amazing. I want him on the show.
Well,
Is he as amazing?
John Tester's a farmer, and he
Hmm.
knows that pain. When he ran against Conrad Burns, I didn't vote for John Tester the first time, simply because, like, I understood what position we were going to be losing at the time, and at the time I was looking for less involvement in government. But there are some things that he has managed to keep, I would argue, in a more conservative realm, and that's been his mind on farmers. And I think that's a lot of, Montana Democrats were always just a different breed of Democrat. They were never going to be like these,
Oh
like
my
Deja talked
God,
about, the
yeah.
progressives. But they were kind of more about the just let everybody be, and oh yeah, well, here's a couple of things that
Mhm.
would work. If we could try this as a society,
Right.
it'd make us a little bit better. Um, you know, so for me, having all of these different experiences with different politicians, Tester was successful because Tester knew, he hadn't been in Washington and he knew the plight of farmers. And so for him, his success hinged on the fact that, at least initially, that he understood what a lot of these farmers were going through. He understood
Right.
how much pain they were suffering. Now, whether or not he still has that root to the farming community, I think he does to an extent. But like anything else, the longer you're in Washington, the less likely it is to be at the forefront of your mind. And I think
Yeah.
that's a lot of the reason why I tend to support term limits, is because you do get disconnected from your community when you have to be elsewhere.
Yeah,
And that's just,
we don't want like politicians that spend their life as politicians. If they're not growing or evolving in office, then we just don't need that.
well, and especially where, as you lose that connection to your community, because you're spending all this time in the big city, not back home on the farm, it is something that starts to weigh on your ability to campaign again. And at some point you will become disconnected from your community. That's just how it is. And for some people it's much faster than others. Some people do great with being able to, stay connected to their community and
For
not
sure.
let life in Washington run rampant over them. But at the same time, some people, it's just like the moment, their goal was to get there and be there, and that was all there was to it, and they talked a
Uh-huh.
great game.
Right.
So
That's what I always say about Donald Trump. If you listen to what he was promising and talking about, He was talking about an inclusive party that included the LGBTQIA. He was talking about immigration reform in the way that would help farmers and ranchers. He was talking about things that would benefit everybody. It's just, so he didn't do it. So
No.
the way I like to explain it is he might have had an opportunity to do something, but he surrounded himself with swamp people and became a swamp legacy. Like, the politicians go into it intending the best of things, but it's a pressure cooker, and you just end up instinctively reacting instead of thinking about it. Somebody said authoritarians are great, and I think of Deja, and I think what one person knows everything about everything that the whole of government does. The whole of government is being used incorrectly, but it's a tool that ensures a certain level of lifestyle for everybody that an autocrat couldn't, that one man couldn't. So I like the whole of government. I like that being able to react independent to one man's okay. It's just we're misusing it, and we're not using the right things in the right way. And what I find amazing, Jeffrey, is like on the news, Title 42 is now the major thing. Oh my God, Title 42, we're using that. We shouldn't use that. That's a COVID thing. That's not even a policy. That's a health policy. Yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, America, for understanding. It's just illegitimate. It's not a way to control the flow of immigration. It's the way to control the flow of COVID. And there isn't COVID, you said. So let's move on and create a better policy.
But that's been the funny one to me. It's like, oh, we need to get rid of all of these COVID policies. All right, cool. We're going to get rid of Title 42 that kept immigrants from coming into the country based on COVID. No, you can't get rid of Title 42. It's like, which is it? Is COVID real, or are you just wanting it because it stemmed the flow of immigration?
Right.
Because if you're saying you want Title 42, you're admitting that COVID's not over.
Right.
But if you say, it's like, which is it? You know, you're either an idiot or a moron. Take your pick.
That's right. And it's not going to stop. Like, I don't understand for 5 years why we didn't at least take applications. There's somebody was like 2 million people. I'm like, yeah, but that's from the past 5 years. Divide that and start taking applications now. They don't have to cross the border to apply, but we stopped application because crossing the line to apply became the crime. It's ludicrous. And then they put Title 42 in to just make sure. And Democrats are like, well, we support it. You can't support it. You can't support it. It just doesn't make sense. It's illegal. I support controlling the flow of immigration. I do. I just don't believe in controlling it through Title 42.
Right. That's the thing. Title 42 made sense when we were in a time, when we were at a time with uncontrolled COVID flow, and we had next to no mitigation policy.
Right.
It made sense then. It doesn't make sense now.
No, we can test them, take their application, and move on with life.
It's like, you want to know how you stem the flow of COVID through immigration? It's like, all right, cool. Hey, we've got COVID shots. You want to get your COVID shots?
Right. And I think that people think it's like the I don't know, the wall in Game of Thrones. Like there's 2 million people just standing on our border, just waiting for that title to end. It's not that. There's camps. People are dying. Like people are walking in, maybe being hung just so that they can like pick our food. Not all immigration is bad. And sometimes when they say 7,000 a month, that's one guy walking in every day for a day job. You know what I mean? Because it sounds better to make them sound illegal. And there's criminals in there. Yes, but no, most immigrants, they're just running. They're just running from something. And I watched a show on Jim Jones and how he took his little cult to the fucking rainforest and how disgusting they said it was. Like you could cut the air with a knife. It was so humid, so hot, so miserable. And I think, yeah, I'd run from that too. You put me in Venezuela or somewhere hot like that, I'm running to America for air conditioning,
Seriously.
So have you ever watched anything on Jim Jones? That gives a new perspective to the Republican rhetoric for me. You know what I mean?
Some of that,
and he started as a social justice warrior. you know, like he was like for inclusive communities and everybody loved him, but at some point he started doing drugs and fucking just went off the rails. Fuck.
I
He
mean,
killed a senator, like, or he a congressman or something. It was bad.
whew, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, I can't say that I've read a ton on Jim Jones. So,
Right. So there's a new idea about putting sulfuric acid into the atmosphere so that it will reflect some of the sun's light, and then we won't hit climate change. How do you feel about that?
that's a stupid idea.
Is it? Why is it stupid? That's not, yeah, of course it's stupid. What does it matter with people?
Like, oh, hey, let's just add something else to the atmosphere, without understanding about how it's going to fuck with everything else. That sounds like a great fucking plan. Or how about, you like actually like diversify your energy to include more zero carbon emission energy sources and
Yeah.
far less to eventually, you'll never hit zero carbon fuel sources. I mean,
Of
because
course
let's
not.
be
The
real.
trees would die.
Well, I was gonna say, well, realistically, you're gonna be dealing with forest fires. You always will. I mean, there's
Mhm.
natural burn cycles for
Yeah,
everything.
right.
And so that's just not something that's gonna happen. Um, but I think with the war in Eastern Europe, I think a lot of countries
Mm.
have realized that if you don't diversify your energy portfolio, you end up with this bullshit.
Right.
When another company, I mean realistic, when another country can manipulate the flow of energy, be it fossil fuels or
Mhm.
anything else, and your economy starts to take a shit, that doesn't make you an independent country and an
That's
independent
right.
economy. And I mean, and here's the other realistic part. There's always going to be some piece of that with the fact that we are a very globalized economy. Whether you're the small nation or the large nation, we're a very globalized economy. And so when these energy prices take a hit the way that they do, it affects everything.
But it
Because
affects it overall in a way that if we were more isolated would affect us more radically, like it is Russia, you know.
oh,
If,
absolutely.
so being independent and having a crisis in the world helps. Microgrids help, you know, and electric helps. What I think is funny is while they're railing against climate change, Biden is building infrastructure that'll handle what we're talking about, you know.
Absolutely. And that's the thing is that, you have countries, you have states that are looking at doing things that other states won't do. What
Right.
was it, Wyoming is, I think, going to build a nuclear power plant, if I
Mm.
remember I heard right.
Yeah, a couple in the middle, but that's the whole idea, is to
It's
put
like,
our energy
exactly.
in the middle and expand it out, but diversify it and create grids that can sustain themselves in outages. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's the thing is that, with all of those energy needs that we have, it's like, what people don't understand is that when you diversify out to all of these different electric sources,
Mhm.
the issue has never been our ability to generate electricity.
Right.
Like, that's not the issue. Our issue is battery storage. So that way,
Right.
when you're not generating as much electricity, you have the ability to store as much as you can for the times when things get difficult.
And
It's why
transmission
it's
lines, of course. Yeah.
it's why we have things like generators, whereas, if you have large capability battery storage, suddenly, you know power can fluctuate a bit, but
Right.
as long as you have a full charge on your battery, you can actually target things a lot differently.
I
So
love that.
you think about it like this. Some places they charge power differently. So they'll have your peak hour charge and then you have your off hour charge.
Right.
Well, what if for housing, let's talk about, equitable access to power. What if, for how, people on, low income housing assistance, with these battery storage techniques, they're able to get power cheaply during non-peak hours to run their house throughout the day. That minimizes the amount that they're going to pay on power, and the companies that are using the power
Right.
are actually the ones that are going to be paying for it. hard,
That's right.
the hard way. And that's the reality is that there are methods, there are ways that you can look at this, but we have to get the technology there in order to be able to make this equitable.
That's the amazing thing. They make these houses for homeless transitions. They could make those energy outputs. They could make them energy collectors. They could make them a part of a microgrid system. So when the grid goes out, there's always going to be energy. And I love that. I mean, battery. I love solar. Like Utah is going solar and wind. It's just to me, it's cool. It's like independent.
Well, that's the thing about it is that energy independence, especially as we move more towards electric, it is going to make life a lot simpler in a lot of different ways. But
Right.
that also means that you have to invest in the infrastructure in order to get there. Like, because that's the thing is that, there are ways to generate heat during the winter that use a lot less energy than what we do now. Because you think about it, you're using two sources. Most people, like if you have a gas forced air furnace, you're using two sources of power in order to generate that heat for your home.
Right.
You are using electricity to run the fan that's going to blow air throughout your house, but you're also using gas in order to superheat that air.
Right. Whereas you
Whereas
could
now
you
you
could
would,
make that fan actually turn into a turbine that creates the energy
well, no,
like they do in
you wouldn't be able
cars.
to necessarily do that with a lot of these fans because those they're heavy load, and so they don't really do that. But what you are more what is easier to do is that with for example, I like to plug floor heat a lot. You can now target specific areas that get hot or cold a lot easier, and so overall you're using a lot less energy than you would if you were trying to just heat the entire house uniformly.
Gotcha. Yeah, and yeah, we do that a lot in this house. We cool zones. We don't cool the whole house.
Right, and that's
Yeah.
just it is that that's always going to be your struggle.
hmm
So
But you don't need to believe in climate change or global warming to support the switch to green. You know what I mean? You can just go with energy independence, which is I think what every Republican wants, right?
energy
Like,
independence, energy diversification. There's no reason why these large big oil companies can't be the reason why energy gets diversified.
yeah,
Nobody's going to give a shit if you fill up with Shell gasoline or Shell electricity.
right.
As long as people can fill up their car and get to the next place. And especially like especially like as battery storage gets a lot better and transmission of power gets a lot better and the
Uh-huh.
ability to recharge these batteries get a lot better, at some point you're not going to have the same issues. You're going to be able to plug in, go to the bathroom, grab a snack with the family, get out, stretch your legs, walk around for a couple minutes, get back in your car and get back on the road, and drive the next 200 miles before you get out, fill your car up again.
Yeah.
It's things have changed, things are changing, and that's where being a part of that diversification is
Mhm.
going to be crucial,
And
because
imagine this, Jeffrey. We're thinking about green technology right now, but imagine in 100 years, we're not going to be thinking about green technology. We're going to be thinking about the amazing nuclear technology we have. It's always going to grow. We're always going to be looking at new
or
technologies.
or maybe at some point you're not even nuclear is not even on the table because we have a transmission system that
Right.
literally floats around the outside of the planet. We suddenly have, like,
Yeah.
Earth has its own ring that is
Right.
constantly facing the sun and
Yeah.
pulling electricity in that way, so that way it can be distributed down to the planet. Why? Because there are papers published on how orbital elevators would work, and those
Yep.
orbital elevators could be electric transmission lines from the power that's collected out in space.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, that's probably 500 years from now, but
Kind
the
of.
reality is that that technology could exist, and there you're not even worried about whether or not
Yeah.
one country or another is gonna be under sanction, because this is electricity that is literally going to be flowing from a place where nobody owns it.
Right. China is trying to get to the moon to put solar panels on it for that idea. They've been working on the transmission of that power. I think that's cool. So I mean, we got to get past the gas, and let's just get our energy as efficiently and cheaply as possible. There's still going to be a world in which gas and oil fits in, fossil fuels fits in, but they're not going to be the size. We're not going to need to depend on that, any one thing. Imagine a world in which you turned off all the hydro and we still had plenty of power. Imagine a world where the sun went down and we still had plenty of power, right? Like
Right.
we're not depending
Or
on one thing.
or you have a satellite's, you have a
Uh-huh.
solar collector ring that literally just faces the sun the entire time, and you never have this discussion ever again,
Right.
because power is being collected and transmitted down
Yeah.
to Earth based on that. I mean, that's the reality of science future,
I love
is
science.
because there are these weird power, like there's these weird theoretical power generation systems. Some even put them like right around the fucking sun, and I'm like, that doesn't sound like a good idea, but sure. To me,
Yeah, I
like a ring
know.
system, more like what, like, Saturn or Neptune has, makes far more sense, because then you would have this actual ring that would face the planet or
Mm,
face the sun. But that's not here,
that's
nor
yeah, because we we
my
don't have
generations will be dead long, long, long
we
time.
don't have the resources on
Oh
Earth
hell
to
no.
create that. That's the asteroid field.
Yep, and I mean, and realistically too, when you look at energy diversification, you know, we think about this, and we've talked about this several times. Yeah, 10% of the energy that came into this country was from Russia, and since those sanctions took place, our our price per barrel has jumped anywhere from 30 to $40 a barrel, even though the price of oil was only, like, I would say about 75, $80 a barrel prior to that. So you think about that, and you think about how expensive oil became, even though we only got 10%, and because Russia's under sanction and all of that. uh all of those other countries who now don't get Russian oil are now having to diversify and find oil and gas and coal elsewhere. It just makes for a greater case in point that the more electricity you're able to produce from non-fossil fuel methods, makes it a far more stable option to have electrical generation done through wind and solar and thermal and hydro and nuclear and whatever else you can figure out.
I appreciate you for that alone, by the way.
It's that those things are going to be crucial to Americans and Europeans being able to control their energy costs.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean,
Because
Russia just tried taking natural gas away from Poland, right?
Poland and Bulgaria.
In Bulgaria, yeah, okay.
So yeah, they've turned it off. They've
Mm.
they've turned off gas supplies to Poland and Bulgaria.
Unless you pay
More
in
going,
rubles. So
unless you
has the European Union been paying Russia in rubles? This
no, no, they weren't.
okay,
But because the ruble value is crashing, and they
right,
don't have access to uh, Russia's central bank doesn't have access to European banks anymore.
right. No euro, no
They
dollars, right?
basically are saying, if you're going to buy from us, you have to pay in rubles, because, well, they can't access the central bank. And everybody said, nah.
Right. No, you can't make that's not what the contract said. We're honoring the contract. Yep.
Well, and that's the thing, is that it's not even about honoring the contract. You know, if all of these countries buy in rubles, by using rubles, that means that it props up the value of the ruble.
Well, of course, right.
But since nobody in Russia can access the central banking system, like SWIFT, for example,
Hmm.
their economy is going to crash hard, and it's going to hurt a lot.
Yeah.
And that, by being able to have people pay in rubles, it bolsters the value of that currency. And
Right.
but before, it was paid in euros or whatever else.
I came to a conclusion. Go ahead and nuke the world, Vlad. I don't care. It'll solve literally almost all my problems. So
I won't have to go to work tomorrow.
right, like he keeps threatening it, and I'm like, yeah, okay, fine. Call him out on it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you said you're going to nuke the world. Yeah, I've heard you. I heard you.
I heard you. Yeah. Is
Yeah,
there any
yeah, yeah.
downside to it? Not really, not after it happens. I'm just really I'm really tired that one man can do all of this and just like I was sad. Like a week ago, we were talking about the people in Mariupol and how, I like that was going to change my perceptions on everything. That's my red line. And guess what? This week I'm still thinking about the people in Mariupol, right? They're still stuck, they're still trapped, they're still not being allowed. You want to take over a city, okay? And there's 5,000 people left in the city before you can do anything in the city. Why would you not let them leave? Why would you continue to bomb them and keep them there? By bombing them, you're keeping the people there to bomb them. You're not keeping them. Your goal is to take over the area. You can't take over the area till the people leave, but you won't let the people leave. This is so weird to me.
Well, and then what Russia said was they've quote unquote evacuated up to 1 million Ukrainian citizens to Russia,
Yeah,
aka kidnapped.
infiltration camps. That's
Yeah.
disgusting. I don't understand. I asked on Twitter, what's the difference between a Nazi concentration camp and a Russian filtration camp? What is it?
Not really a whole lot of difference.
No, not when you can see satellite imageries of mass graves. And by
Well,
the
and
way, like having Ukrainians paying Ukrainians in bread and water to fill mass graves, that's disgusting. You know what I
yep.
mean? That's
Well, and
that's Nazi. That's Nazis.
that's and yeah, exactly it. That's exactly it. And then on top of that, you had so your Canada's one of Canada's houses has voted to label what is happening in Russia genocide.
Good.
And so, that's the thing is like at some point when this gets labeled a genocide, which
Yeah.
it has been, because I mean, Putin's statements have said it all. Russia or Ukraine doesn't have a right to exist.
Right. They,
At
they're
some
take
point,
they're
that's
taking teachers to re-educate them on how to teach Ukrainian kids.
well, and what's going to happen is that at some point it's going to be labeled a genocide, and
Mhm.
at that point, like I hate to say it, we're not going to have any choice but to get involved.
We're involved anyway.
I
You know what
mean,
I mean?
more involved, like actual troops on the ground
I
fighting
think,
this war.
yeah, I don't like the idea, but my only issue is the nukes. Like we're gonna go in and we're gonna go strong. Where do we stop? And what happens with the nukes? How do we stop the nukes?
Well, that, like I said, unfortunately, there's a point where it's just like we have to accept the fact that he's threatening to nuke people whether or not they're actually there at all or not.
Right.
And the reality is that even for even for some of the European countries, at some point, they're not going to be able to sit back and let Ukraine fight this alone. I
And
guarantee you,
Moldova wants help, right?
Moldova wants help, and they might get it from Bulgaria,
I hope so.
even though the two countries have issues with each other, because Moldova was once a part of Bulgaria, but then it became
Mhm.
its own it became its own country.
Weren't they
Um
both part of Romania?
or Romania, one of the two.
Right.
I might now I gotta look it up because
Yeah, I
I'm one of
got you.
those people where it's like I need to.
But I love these little countries there. Like those are the North Macedonia, like I
Yeah, it
have
was part of Romania. Yeah, you're right.
right.
Moldova was part of Romania, not
So
Bulgaria.
can't they just fold back into Romania and like stand strong? Like
Well,
Romania is already a NATO member, right?
yes, and there's been that question of whether or not Moldova would be willing to do that. And the answer has been no. Um, if they did, they would automatically fall under NATO
But they
protection.
want their independence. I get that. I would too.
Absolutely.
You don't want to
And
move back into your parents' house if you don't have to, right?
right, exactly. And so that's one of those things where I would say folding into countries for the sake of getting NATO
Yeah.
membership is not the way to go.
No.
I do think that Zelensky is right in what eventually Ukraine is going to do when they ultimately win and rebuild. I would say that they're going to look in some ways, I would call it a hybrid between the Czech Republic and Israel. They're going to have their own arms industries in order to protect themselves against a country that is constantly willing to land grab. They're going to develop a very strict regiment defense force.
Heck yeah. And
And
system.
absolutely. I mean, as we're starting to see already, a lot of these Ukrainian weapons systems that they've literally taken old Russian systems and have, I mean, Ukraine used to be like the freaking Rust Belt of the Soviet Union's
Yeah.
weapons program,
Right. They're
and
building their own Neptunes now, though.
they're, the Neptune is based off of Russian rockets, which were
Right.
manufactured in Ukraine, and
Right.
basically they went, well, screw you guys. All right, here's how we're going to take this missile and actually make it effective, and then they sunk a freaking cruiser.
Yep. I love it. By the way, those bodies aren't going back to Russia. Like, nobody wants those bodies. Nobody's asking for those Russian bodies back.
Which is, it's been absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
Um,
But I agree with you. I think Ukraine will be a hybrid. They might, like I always say about creating like an America's force, they may make a Baltic force, you know what I mean? And just have a loose defense relationship outside of NATO with the other Baltic states. That would
well,
be cool.
I think that they'll have a strong relationship with those states.
Mhm.
It's
I
right
hope
now,
so.
it's just this because Ukraine is not part of the EU and because they are not part of NATO. Like Russia is going to take every opportunity that if a NATO member country sends troops into that country, they're going to say NATO's attacking us,
Mhm.
whether or not NATO has actually, been involved or not.
But they're saying it now. They could say it at any day that NATO came in and attacked an oil refinery in our country,
Oh,
or
absolutely,
it
they
was
would.
an American cruise missile that hit points in Russia. Like they could at any time say we're involved. In fact, Vladimir Putin said, "I'm going to be swift on my revenge for you if you arm them anymore," and we keep arming them. Like he
Yeah,
keeps drawing red lines, like back there. Like we're way past that line, buddy.
we've been past that. We've been past that one for a while.
Right. When that lady crawled, that pregnant lady crawled out of the hospital and died. Yeah, we were past that,
Yeah, it's like, yeah, and
Yeah.
that's one of those things where it's like,
Yeah.
do I like the fact that we have to do what we're doing? No,
No.
but this is one of those things where the group of people who thought that Russia was our friends need to very clearly take a look at this and say, no, they weren't. They were
Right.
not our friends. You know, I don't want to call necessarily any country our enemy. Like we have allies and we have working partners. People we don't
Right.
necessarily agree with, but we do business for the greater good.
There was an actually a prisoner exchange between us and Russia. So there
Yep.
is still normal diplomatic things going
There's
on with a
still some
country.
diplomatic things happening.
Right.
Exactly. There's still
Mhm.
there's still some lines of communication open. And I think that I think that within the ranks there are people that are still working to make sure that this thing doesn't go nuclear. We had that with the Soviet Union, way
Right.
back in the day. I mean, when nuclear missiles showed up in Cuba, we were ready to just freaking bomb Moscow right then and there. But
Yeah.
people with cooler heads said, we don't want to do this. This is a terrible fucking idea. Wiping out
Yeah.
the globe is not the way you want to go.
That's how we got the Berlin Wall. That was the compromise for the Bay of Pigs.
you know so
Interesting, though.
but that's and here, what you're going to end up seeing is
Yeah.
like we've talked about several times. Nobody thought NATO was useful, especially in the last administration.
Mhm.
And so far Vladimir Putin has done more to sell NATO than you know anybody else could have.
So if Vladimir Putin stopped the war today, removed all of his troops, and went back to Russia, would the sanctions come off? Like
No,
how you couldn't, right? And he knows that. Like
no.
they're there. Those sanctions are in place till Russia falls and rebuilds. You
Those
know,
sanctions are in place until there are certain guarantees that will be
right?
made.
Till Russia falls into bankruptcy.
It's
You know?
either Putin, gets a one-way ticket to The Hague,
Yeah,
and there are some conditions that are met for economic relief,
exactly.
or Russia's literally going to be isolated. I mean, you look at it, China keeps saying, "Oh, Russia's our ally, Russia's our friend,"
Hmm.
but then you've got like a lot of payment processors and other companies that won't do business with Russia now. And the
Yeah,
reason is because they're an unreliable trading partner. Like
that's
like
right.
even now, like for example, Russia's been like, "Oh, we're going to sell gas to friendly countries."
Uh-huh.
And even China's like, yeah, you've already shown that you weaponize your gas fields. We're not necessarily that interested in
Well,
that.
not to mention the fact that China is right next door to Russia, but yet there's no pipeline. You know, like Russia would actually literally have to put their oil, gas and oil on boats and ship it to China. They would have to ship it to India. There's no easy way to get there. They would spend more in getting the oil there than the bargain price that they're selling it at. That's so funny to me.
So, I mean, realistically, like, there's always an off ramp for Russia. There
Yeah.
always is, but it's just that off ramp went from just fucking go home to
Mhm.
there are certain things that will have to be met.
Yeah.
Now, some are calling for complete denuclearization of Russia
Me,
after that. And I'm like,
me, me.
I mean, personally, I think the entire world should be denuclearized. But
Well, I
hey,
think it should be you will denuclearize if everyone else denuclearizes too. It's a chance for a denuclearization treaty in the world. You know what I
mhm.
mean? We're going to make Russia do it, but Russia, the counter to that is everyone else has to too, because I really want a nuclear free world, a
I mean,
nuclear weapon free world.
I do too. And well, and also too, my hope would eventually be that we're creating enough power that we wouldn't need to use nuclear energy for power either.
Of
Um,
course, but there's a place for it right now. Yeah.
exactly. There's it's a great stepping stone until.
Right. And who cares? Maybe there's a small nuclear plant that's like a thorium plant that's in the middle of your town somewhere that kicks on in emergency. Everything else failed. You know what I mean? The apocalypse has come. At least you still got something. I don't
So,
know.
um, but I mean, realistically, like, sadly, that's not going to happen. But what this is,
It's our best chance for
but
it in our
what this
lifetime.
is, what this has also shown though too is that um, the world won't do a whole lot
Yeah,
as
right.
long as you're nuclear armed. And I really do think that you're going to see a nuclear arms race 2.0 because of this, because everybody is going to look at this, take notes, and say,
Mhm.
oh, if I don't want another country to mess with me, and they've been like they have been, I've got to build nuclear weapons in order to get them to leave me alone.
Yeah. I mean,
And
Donald Trump sold nuclear technology to Saudi Arabia, and
mhm,
North Korea had it. They got it from Russia. Iran is developing it. They got it from somewhere. And these are countries that don't mind selling that technology to other like-minded, people. Like Palestine and India have nukes. Wow, like that's a scary situation there and there alone.
Palestine, you mean Pakistan?
Pakistan, Palestine. Did I say
Like
Palestine?
you said, Palestine. I was like, wait. I mean,
Pakistan.
Israel won't admit it, but Israel has nukes.
Man, they have Iron Dome lasers now. They don't even need to use like the missiles
Well, that's
anymore.
right, and
That's
that's
what they're developing right now, which is
yep.
pretty cool to me.
So, I mean, realistically speaking, like and that was one of the other things is that if Iran, Saudi Arabia had made it clear that if Iran had developed a nuclear missile, they would actually
Mhm.
buy technology from Pakistan. And
Good.
so that's when we were like, fuck it, we'll sell you ours.
That's scary as fuck, though.
Well, nuclear proliferation is a major problem, and
Yeah, agreed. There's so many other ways to kill so many other people, like I just
or
nuclear is a
don't.
dangerous
That'd
thing. Or don't, right? Like just
be
admit
great.
admit people have the right to exist.
Mhm.
That wouldn't be so bad. So do you have any just the tips? I yeah, I didn't get one from Deja. God bless. It's all right.
Well, I don't have one really because I've just been so busy.
Good. I
I
have
will
to. I
say
already have to, so it doesn't really matter.
I have to say, I'm going to be trying out gardener's vinegar today to find out if I can use it as a natural way to kill weeds.
Cool. I
We'll see
like
if it
that.
works. I have no idea if it will or not, but I'm going to give it a shot because we've got these little blackberry fucking things that drive me crazy. And I'm going to see if it'll actually work on them.
Okay. I can't wait to find out.
So
What I learned was about this spyware technology that there's an in, there's a lot of spyware technology going out there, you know what I mean? And I learned that it isn't persistent, and that if you turn your phone off and on, it can't withstand that. So I don't know, try that if you're having a problem with technology. I don't know how to turn my phone off actually. So I don't
hold the
I
power
run it
button.
out of I run it out of energy. That's how I turn it off. But
You
yeah,
hold the power button on it, and depending on, do you have an Android or an iPhone?
oh, an iPhone, of course.
Yeah, you'll hold the power button and then a little drop down menu will show up, and then you have to slide it over in order to fully shut down your phone.
Technology is amazing, isn't it?
Gotta love it.
Gotta love it. All right. Well, thank you for listening. How about that? Thank you for listening to Public Access America. We're amazing. You're amazing. And you could do amazing things anytime you want to. I don't know. Like, I think we started to have an argument about optimism and pessimism with Deja. And it was like people, seriously, you think the world is trash because people keep telling you it's trash. It's not. Like, it's not, you
There are
know.
certain things that are trash.
Sure, but they're not overwhelming and unsolvable. That's my point. Like, we just need to realize that. And I told my friend that, like, you just think work sucks because your mind is telling you work sucks. And he's been in a better mood about it. He's like, maybe if I saw the positives, I wouldn't focus on the negatives, and then I would be working towards better things. And it worked for him. So maybe it'll work for other people too. Fuck, go in the garden, get your fucking hands dirty, get fucking dirt under your nail, be Jesus, get in there, do stuff. Oh,
There you
I
go.
love that. I love you, Jeffrey. Thanks for being here.
Catch you later.
Bye. Yay. Love it.
Fantastic.
It is pretty cool. All right, we got a good response from the Great Resignation.